People often ask me questions about posture and meditation, whether they should be sitting on the floor, in a chair, or if it's okay to lie down. And that's an important consideration because if you're feeling uncomfortable, for instance, if you're attempting to sit on the floor, cross legged, or on the edge of your bed, or in a straight back dining room chair, or even metal folding chair, you're probably going to be feeling so uncomfortable that you're not going to want to meditate for very long, if at all. The ideal posture for meditation depends largely on three things: the specific kind of practice you're doing, your body type, and your personal preferences. I'm Ben Rufana, and I have a lot of detail in this short article that I'm creating that I want to make sure I include. So I will be referring to my notes. I'm also a bit sleep deprived because I've been doing for weeks this intensive form of meditation practice that you don't quite sleep as much when you're doing this. But since I have this window of time while I'm on retreat, I'm taking advantage of it. So bear with me. Full lotus, the classic seated posture, which to describe it, and you start out with both legs extended, but you bring one foot up so it's resting just above your knee. The sole of your foot is turned somewhat upwards but back, and then you pull the other foot up over your knee, and so both feet are rested on your thighs, just behind your knees. But that could be difficult for a lot of people to get into if you're not so flexible. There's half lotus posture for the somewhat less flexible. One foot is resting on the ground and the other foot up, resting behind the knee. But the advantage of either full or half lotus posture, if you're doing intensive yogic practices such as pranayama that involve a lot of specific kind of breath work and or breath control and all, moving the prana through the body, the full and half lotus positions, the advantages is it helps to maintain a certain alignment. It facilitates proper execution of this intensive form of practice. Many Buddhist traditions also emphasize the importance of proper posture during meditation. Tibetan practices, for instance, often reference the 7-point posture, and this includes sitting cross-legged, ideally in either full or half lotus posture, your hands resting in a balanced mudra. I'm bringing my hands up just so you can see, but normally your hands will be resting comfortably in your lap. You'll be keeping your spine straight, your shoulders relaxed, your chin slightly tucked, your eyes either closed or gently open, and your tongue resting against your upper palate. Other Buddhist traditions, while perhaps less formal, still emphasize the significance of sitting upright without back support. And many practitioners commonly sit on a zafu, which a meditation cushion, because it helps to elevate the hips and ensures comfort while also allowing the spine to remain naturally aligned. Having trained for many years with a Taoist master in the internal martial arts of Xingyi Quan and Baguazhang, I spent many years doing a great deal of internal Qigong practices. And many of these practices involve various standing or squatting postures, some of which can be quite strenuous. A number of these practices also incorporate physical movement, adding a dynamic element to the cultivation of qi or life force. Other practices are performed while sitting on a flat surface, such as the bench, so that your thighs are parallel to the ground and your feet are flat on the floor. And there are also some practices where you're sitting cross-legged on the floor. Through all of these practices, there is a tremendous emphasis on the cultivation of qi and its movement throughout the body. And at higher levels, These practices involve a kind of alchemical process where one continually refines and transforms the various forms of qi to develop both the body and mind in profound ways. I've also known and worked with people over the years who, even though they haven't done any formal training in either Buddhist or Hindu-Vedic traditions, are comfortable and even prefer sitting cross-legged on the floor. And that has a lot to do with pelvic rotation. If your pelvis is naturally rotated forward, that's going to make it much easier for you to sit upright. Whereas if you have this sort of backwards pelvic rotation, then it's going to make it a real struggle to sit upright. Your butt's going to be hurting, your back will be aching, and going to be much more uncomfortable. Even though I hadn't done any formal training in either Buddhist or Hindu-Vedic traditions, from my early 20s, I was naturally drawn to meditation, and thinking it was the thing to do, I would be sitting on the floor, cross-legged, often for an hour or two at a time. But I would sit against the wall for back support. But over the years, I transitioned to sitting in a chair during my own meditation practice. And since I travel so much for work, I often find myself in all kinds of different spaces. So wherever I go, I'm always seeking out the most comfortable chairs I can find, where I can sit reasonably upright. And I much prefer sitting in a chair. For one, since I usually meditate for 1 to 3 hours at a time, I found that I'm able to sit for far longer and go into much deeper states when I'm sitting comfortably. Second, given the immense challenges I face, namely the fact that I'm doing my work in a society where people are so distracted and not always receptive, I see no point in subjecting myself to the additional discomfort of sitting on the ground or even on a cushion without back support. Taking all this into consideration, sitting comfortably best serves my needs. And even while sitting in a chair, I still remain mindful of my posture, sitting fairly upright while also allowing my body to be comfortably supported by the chair. I'm taking in full deep breaths, breathing all the way down to my abdomen while simultaneously expanding my rib cage and also exhaling fully. With the support of a comfortable chair, I'm not distracted by all the bodily discomforts, which allows me to let go and descend into much, much deeper states of awareness. And when I have the opportunity to sit for such long periods of time, 90 minutes, 2 hours, 3 hours at a stretch, I can feel the innate healing intelligence within my own body and mind going to work, enabling me to diffuse and digest my lived experiences along with any stresses, whatever residual emotions are hanging out in my body. So I'm able to be much more productive in my own meditation practice. One factor to consider for those who strive to adhere to the more traditional styles of meditation practice is that many of the yogis, gurus, sadhus, Buddhist monks who spend inordinate amounts of time sitting in meditation, especially cross-legged in either full or half lotus postures, they end up developing all kinds of issues with their hips and knees and other joints over time. People often ask me if they can lie down to meditate. I generally sit up when doing meditation practice, and I encourage the people that I work with to do so as well. Because in many instances, when people do lie down to practice, they end up drifting off to sleep. And I've found myself doing the same thing. So it's generally, I find it better to sit up. But there are times when I make an exception to this rule. During my mid to late 20s, when I had the traumas of my childhood and adolescence resurfacing, and I found that my relationships became a painful series of reenactments. And it was evoking all kinds of painful emotions. And I would find myself often curled up in fetal position, breathing into the depths of those all-consuming emotions for hours at a time. And at a certain point, I could feel that breaking open and all that pain coming out of my body in waves, and these emanations of warmth beginning to flow from within. But for the majority of that time, as I said, I was curled up on my side in fetal position, breathing into the depths of all those emotions. And then in 2009, when the banksters in the financial industry with their risky financial maneuvers crashed the economy and the bottom fell out from underneath so many of us, I didn't have that much work. I didn't know how I was going to survive. And so I'd find myself laying in bed, consumed with this overwhelming anxiety. And I would be laying on my back, breathing into the anxiety for hours at a time until I'd finally drift off to sleep. But again, other than that, I generally encourage people to sit up while doing their meditation practice. That said, the practice of yoga nidra goes back thousands of years. It's often referred to as yogic sleep. That's rooted in the Hindu-Vedic tradition. It guides practitioners into profoundly deep meditative states between sleep and wakefulness. And that is done while lying down. You're guided through systematic stages of mind-body awareness, breath control, and visualization. And this practice can be profoundly restful and rejuvenating, while also serving as a pathway to self-realization. I also need to add in some of the deepest meditative states I've ever experienced have occurred while spending time in sensory deprivation flotation tanks. In these instances, on my back, suspended in a bath of salt water in complete silence and darkness. And during these times that I've spent in the flotation tanks, I've experienced visions, flashes of insight and clarity, have come up with all kinds of workable solutions. At times, I've also gained states of heightened spiritual awareness, similar to those that one would experience during extended meditation retreats. And there have also been many instances where a deeper level of mind takes over and the articles I'm working on write themselves. Sitting in complete stillness while meditating definitely has its advantages, but is not always necessary. For those who feel overwhelmed, especially when dealing with trauma, or those who find stillness particularly challenging, I often recommend walking meditation. I typically have people start out with the walking meditation by standing still, closing their eyes, and bringing to the forefront of their awareness any issues or concerns or interaction, situation they're struggling with. And as you do that, you want to notice what you feel in response to these concerns or whatever situation, challenge you're facing. Notice what you're feeling and where these feelings are situated in your body. Descend into the depth of those feelings to the best of your ability. Be fully immersed in the depth of those feelings, breathing softly and deeply. And stay there for a minute, a few minutes, deepening into these feelings and sensations, and then open your eyes and see if you can maintain connection to what you're feeling. And after a minute or a few, begin to walk at a slow, gradual pace while still maintaining that connection to any feelings and bodily sensations. You're primarily focused on one, what you're feeling is one. Two, you're breathing softly and deeply from the depth of these feelings. And three, you're walking at a slow, gradual pace. And so that flow of feeling, your breath, and the pace of your walk, it all comes into this kind of alignment. So again, walking meditation can be especially valuable for those who are struggling with overwhelming and painful emotions. And when I work with people with histories of trauma, I make sure that I teach them the walking meditation to keep them more grounded and more comfortable. It helps to mitigate some of the most difficult, the most overwhelming of emotions, while also allowing you to access deeply meditative states while your body is in motion. As previously mentioned, I started out meditating while sitting cross-legged on the floor itself, no cushion, but I would lean against the wall for back support. Years later, I began doing hours of intensive internal martial arts practice in Xingyi Quan, Baguazhang, which involved a lot of Qigong practice. And these Qigong practices involved a lot of squatting or holding other very strenuous positions for extended periods of time. By the time I developed my own system of meditation practices in my mid-20s, I discovered that I much preferred meditating while sitting comfortably in a chair. If you're doing any form of intensive practice such as pranayama, I do recommend that you follow the guidance and sit in full or at least half lotus posture. Or if you're doing Taoist Qigong practices, you want to adopt the postures that are specific to the practices that you're doing. Aside from that, I encourage you to be willing to explore, try out different meditation practices and postures to determine those which will work best for you. I want to thank you for joining me here. If you found value in what you've heard, look below, click like and subscribe if you're seeing this video on YouTube. Also, I teach a whole series of intensive meditation practices that I've developed over the years. These practices awaken the healing intelligence residing within your body and mind. If you're dealing with whatever traumatic wounding, there's a lot of sadness, grief, emotional overwhelm, if you're going through a breakup or divorce, these practices are especially valuable. And even if you're dealing with physiological health challenges such as digestive, respiratory disorders, these practices can be of tremendous benefit. So there's a link below. If you feel moved to work with me, then click on the link. You could message me through my contact form on my website, or you can call my Google Voice number. Either one. I'm happy to be of assistance to you in any way I can.